Thanks so much for being here, everyone. If you can, it's JJ Gray who's singing, JJ Gray and Mofro. The song is I Believe in Everything. And if you can take this opportunity to grab some paper and pencils or highlighters or markers or crayons or something to draw with, now would be a great time to grab that because we will need that shortly. If you don't have paper, a paper bag will do, a paper plate, a paper towel, an envelope, whatever you can draw on, something that you can draw with will be really helpful for us later in this session.
Welcome, everybody, to Interrupting Imposter Syndrome through Creative Play. This is going to be presented by Sabina Morgan. Sabina Morgan is a senior organizational consultant in student affairs. She's been a staff member for almost 15 years and is a proud Cal alumni. Go Bears. We are super happy to have you, and we are pumped to have some fun. If you are here and you're not ready to have fun and enjoy yourself, this is not the place for you. So before we get started, I do have some good housekeeping before we get started. I just want everyone to note that we will be providing the slides and recording this session for everyone so that they can go to the Now Conference website after the conference has concluded if you want to revisit the slides. In today's session, you will be muted. And we would like for you to stay muted unless you have raised your hand and we've called upon you to speak so that we can minimize any feedback. Please add any questions that you have throughout the presentation to the chat. If you want your question to remain anonymous, shoot me a message directly. You can also, again, put your question in the chat. We also have closed captioning. So if you want to be able to read throughout the presentation, definitely click the closed captioning box at the bottom of the screen to allow for subtitles. With that, please, please, please shake your hands for Sabina Morgan. Welcome, Sabina. I am passing it over to you.
Thank you so much, Maya. I'm so happy to be here. I'm going to tell you a little bit about me, and we're going to do some playing today, but I also want to know about you. So if while I'm talking, you can introduce yourselves in the chat and share a little bit about why you chose this session. That's really great feedback for me. So please feel free to add that information into the chat, and let's go ahead and get started. So hi, I am Sabina Morgan. I'm a senior organizational consultant in student affairs. I've been on campus now for 16 years, and this month is my 10th anniversary in student affairs. I am going to start us today to talk a little bit about the most common piece of advice that you get when talking about imposter syndrome, and that is fake it till you make it. I have made an entire career and life out of faking it till I make it. So I'm going to just give you a little bit of context, and then we'll jump into the presentation. So I am the child of immigrant parents, first generation. My dad is from India. My mother is from New Zealand. If you have ever seen any of the stereotypes about Indian families, you know that there is a significant pressure to succeed. We are supposed to be doctors and lawyers and engineers. And of my parents' 5 children, my dad was praying for just one neurosurgeon. Please, can I just get one neurosurgeon? And so I'll tell you, my story, as I have understood it in my life, is that I failed them dramatically, that I brought tremendous shame onto my family. I got pregnant at 15 and had a child when I was 16 years old. And no one thought that I was ever going to make anything of my life, right? No one wanted to talk about the fact that I had this baby. It was a quiet thing. And these expectations still existed despite that. And despite the fact that my parents weren't also meeting those expectations. My dad was a bartender for most of my life and worked as a car salesman. So the one thing I did have going for me, fortunately, was that I had my parents' support. And so thank goodness they helped push me to hustle. I did learn my work ethic from them, and I learned how to hustle and how to make ends meet. When you have a kid at 16, diapers and formula and daycare and things are expensive. So until I became an employee at Cal, I've worked 2 jobs my entire life. And throughout that time, I've always felt like I was faking it, like I was a fraud. At 21, I got hired at Sears and I started selling Christmas trees. It was a seasonal job. And come January, my bills were still there. I still had responsibilities. And so I went to the director of the auto center and I said, look, guy, I know how to put gas in my car, but I don't really do that myself even, but there's nothing I can't learn. So if you give me a chance, I'm going to hustle, I'm going to make it. And within a year, I was managing my own freestanding Sears Auto Center. And so at 22 years old, I had 8 salespeople reporting to me. I had 10 tire installers and I had 4 mechanics. And I'm a 22-year-old girl who a year prior didn't know anything about cars. When you talk about imposter syndrome, I was definitely feeling that. And while I've progressed throughout my career, that feeling has stayed with me. I went back to school at 25 because I wanted to grow my business. I started taking classes in community college. I took one class at a time because I wanted to grow my business. I took a class in marketing to figure out how to do that. And it turned out I really liked school. Like school was fun and I was really good at it. And so while I was raising this kid and trying to be a soccer mom and working 2 jobs, I was taking classes one at a time. I moved back to California to establish residency because I knew I wanted to go to school here. And so when it came time to apply to UCs, I checked the box at UC Berkeley because I had a fee waiver and it was free. I didn't really believe that I belonged here, despite the fact that I got straight A's in community college. I did not believe that I belonged at a place like UC Berkeley. And then I actually got into UC Berkeley. I got into all the schools that I applied to and had to choose. But even when I got that admissions letter from UC Berkeley, I said, well, okay, either they made a mistake and they have no idea what they're doing, or they felt bad for me because they read my story, or maybe I met some quota for an underrepresented student. And so they're like, okay, well, we'll let that one in. She's probably not going to succeed, but we'll let her be here. Right. So that story carried me through my undergraduate career. I double majored. I graduated Phi Beta Kappa. I worked 20 hours a week while I was on campus. I applied for and received a really prestigious grant as an undergraduate. I was a Haas scholar, so I got money to do my own undergraduate research. And even when I got that grant, I said, well, it's because I work on the floor with the person who runs that program, so she knows me. So of course they let me in and gave me that money. It wasn't until recently in the last 5 years where I really started to unpack my own imposter syndrome. And so today I want to share with you some ways, some means and techniques that I've used to be able to kind of unpack that story. So I'm going to start with sharing my screen here. Sorry, here we go. Share. All right, so everyone can see that. If you can just give me a nod if I can see you, that's helpful. Awesome. So we're going to talk about interrupting imposter syndrome through creative play. What you see here on the screen, this is my 2021 vision board. So each year, what I do is I collect items from magazines, from my junk mail, and I keep scraps of things to think about how I might want to give myself a visual of what I want my life to look like. And so what you're looking at here is my 2021 vision board. It hangs right here above my desk. I get to look at it every day. I want to draw your attention to this top left corner because it's one of the reasons why we're here in this conversation today. What you see in that top left corner, it says innocent curiosity can turn discovery into the best job in the world. Expect better. I believe that I can do better for myself, and I believe that I can do better by my organization. And so when you see this, find the silly and the serious and see the joy. This is what sparked this presentation today. When I asked my mom, I said, hey, I think I'm going to submit a proposal for this conference. The theme of this is innovate, collaborate, and grow. When you think about what I'm an expert on, what comes to mind for you, Mom? She did not skip a beat. My mother said to me without hesitation and with the biggest grin on her face, she said, bullshit. And so, yeah. So when you think about maybe where imposter syndrome comes from, right? How do we begin to learn these stories, right? How do we begin to unpack where our understanding is? And while my mom was technically joking, that narrative that I'm faking it and I'm a fraud, it's pretty deep rooted and it takes a lot of work to unpack for many of us. So again, we're going to talk a little bit about that. Happy to talk about any other pieces of my vision board if you would like to. But let's talk a little bit about imposter syndrome first, right? So we're going to talk about what is imposter syndrome, how does it manifest, what are the impacts, and then what can we do about it? And then we're going to take some time to play. So what is imposter syndrome? I'm having technical difficulties over here. So normally I have my notes on my screen. So forgive me for flipping through papers. Well, let's talk about it. So the Merriam-Webster textbook definition of imposter syndrome says that it's a psychological condition that is characterized by persistent doubt concerning one's abilities or accomplishments, accompanied by the fear of being exposed as a fraud, despite the evidence of one's ongoing success. So it was first described by psychologists Suzanne Imes and Pauline Rose Clance in the 1970s. And they said that imposter syndrome or imposter phenomenon occurs among high achievers who are unable to internalize and accept their success. It describes millions of people who don't experience an inner sense of competence or success, despite what the external evidence shows. It's often overwhelming evidence of our abilities, and yet we dismiss them as merely a matter of luck, of timing, of outside help, of charm, even computer error. Because people who have this feel they somehow managed to slip through the system undetected, in their mind, it's just a matter of time before we're found out. So I want to clarify, it's not just self-doubt, right? Self-doubt can be normal. All of us experience self-doubt at some point. But with imposter syndrome, we believe that there's a risk that we're going to be found out. Maybe people will discover that we aren't good as they might think we are. Maybe we believe we don't actually belong, or that we're just doing a great job at hiding our mistakes and shortcomings, when in actual fact, our contributions are valued. So I chose this image because we all kind of have a map of how we view the world. And oftentimes these maps can get distorted and cause us to believe things that may not be true. So even in the image that I showed here, in practical terms, this map is distorted, right? It shows that North America is significantly larger than Africa, despite the fact that Africa is almost 2 million square miles larger than North America, right? The perceptions of the creator shape the information that we use to make meaning. If you just looked at this map, you wouldn't recognize that Asia is significantly larger than North America. They look about equitable in size, but that is perception of the creator that's shaping that reality. So unless we pause to question how we know what we know, we can perpetuate these false narratives in our mind. So imposter syndrome can really be understood as a case of distorted thinking. We think that we're inadequate or defective in some way, and that bad things are going to happen as a result, when the facts and experiences of our lives objectively indicate that this is not the case. And while the causes may be systemic, it's an internal experience of believing that you are not as competent as others believe or perceive you to be. And even in cases where there may be a genuine problem with how we're perceived by others, we amplify the magnitude of that problem and potentially take even constructive criticism and turn it into destructive criticism, rather than using it as the growth opportunity that may have been intended. Now, while it was initially thought that only women experience imposter syndrome, the research now clearly shows that anyone can experience imposter syndrome, regardless of their gender expression or identity. And in fact, the experience of imposter syndrome can actually be compounded by the implications of living with marginalized identities. So Dr. Lisa Orbe-Austin, who's one of my favorite researchers on imposter syndrome, she explains that when you're from an underrepresented group, you can feel what we call the double impact of imposter syndrome, which means that you may be experiencing imposter syndrome internally, and then you're constantly told by systems and people that you don't belong, that you're not good enough, and only have the position that you're in because maybe you were a diverse candidate, which reinforces the experience that you may be a fraud, but you're not. And this can make overcoming your imposter syndrome even more difficult because you have to work to actively challenge both the internal and the external messages that are suggesting that you're a fraud. And these messages can be insidious and aggressive and convincing. For first generation folks, when we're the first for whatever we're doing, our imposter syndrome is also impacted by our family histories. Maybe our parents had to work extraordinarily hard, working extreme hours or multiple jobs, or jobs that were fragile and unstable. And this created models for us about how to work and fear about the stability of our circumstances that can affect our tendencies to overwork and our fear of being exposed. So we often feel that we're on the margins because maybe we don't have role models in our families and we're not necessarily taught how to be successful or comfortable in certain settings. And we're taught particular paradigms for success, right? Like put your head down, do great work and you'll get rewarded. But these don't often work out in our professional arenas. And sometimes our success is holding up a variety of people in our families, and that makes our own success really scary to lose because it can impact so many people, right? So how does imposter syndrome manifest? It manifests in so many different ways. We're used to the idea that maybe imposter syndrome prevents us from participating in activities because we think we aren't good enough at them or we aren't good enough for them, right? That is a really common understanding of how imposter syndrome manifests. Maybe you don't apply for that job because you think, oh, well, I'm not really qualified for that. But it also shows up in a lot of other ways, right? Imposter syndrome often prevents us from speaking up. It causes us to overcompensate in order to prevent getting found out, right? So we work even harder so no one will know that we're a fraud. For me, right, when I was at Cal, I always sat in the second row of every class and I went to every class. I never sat in the front row because it was too eager and I didn't want to be a suck up, but I sat in that second row because I was sucking up and I wanted my faculty to know that I was there. And I went to every office hour so that they would know my story, but I attributed my grades to the fact that, oh, it's because they know me because I went to their office hours and they see me. And I told them about like my 13-year-old that I'm struggling with who's in middle school. So they felt bad for me. So that's why they gave me the grade, right? Even though I worked really hard, I worked really, really hard and showed up at every class. Sometimes imposter syndrome shows up as procrastination due to the weight of not meeting expectations. If you had any idea how much I delayed on preparing this presentation for you today, because I wanted it to be perfect, right? You see that on the list too, perfectionism. And then there's this idea of needing to know everything before beginning or believing you're qualified, right? This shows up as, well, I can't apply for that job because I don't have that degree. If I had an MBA, I would be qualified for that. So I need to go get my MBA before I think that I can even throw my hat in the ring for something. In this presentation alone, for me, it meant reading dozens of articles. I read at least 4 books to prepare for this presentation, despite the fact that I live this every single day, right? It's that needing to know everything before you can begin. It's denying your ability and attributing success to luck, to mistakes, to overwork, or as a result of a relationship. It's discounting the praise that you get and feeling fear and guilt about your own success. And oftentimes it's struggling with anxiety and depression and frustration due to the pressure to meet your own internal standards. So you can see that imposter syndrome isn't just about stepping back and not throwing yourself into whatever it is that you're interested in doing. It often shows up as overwork as well. So I'm going to ask for you to launch the poll, Marissa. And let's talk about, right? How does your imposter syndrome manifest? This is multiple choice, so you can choose as many answers as you like. We're going to leave it open for about a minute. And select the things that speak to you. I'm watching the results here as they come up. And we're about 30 seconds in. So there are so many ways, so many different types of personalities that show up, right? Perfectionist, you set really high expectations for yourself. And even if you meet 99% of your goals, you still feel like a failure. And any small mistake that you make will make you question your own competence. Maybe you're a natural genius, right? And things normally come easy to you. And when you have to struggle or work hard to accomplish something, you take that as a sign that you aren't really good enough, right? You're used to your skills coming easily. And when you have to put in effort, your brain tells you that you're an imposter. Maybe you're a soloist and you feel like you have to accomplish things on your own. And if you need to ask for help, that's some sign of failure or you're a fraud. Maybe you're a Superman, right? You push yourselves to work harder than everyone around you to prove that you're not an imposter and you feel the need to succeed in all aspects of your life. Let's go ahead and close the poll and see the results from this. What I want you to see as you are looking at the results of this poll is you're not alone, right? Obviously, you chose this session for a reason, but look at the different ways that this manifests for just the people in this group. I mean, there are so many of us who experience this avoidance and this anxiety. So we're going to play and we're going to talk a little bit about how to manage that anxiety. So I want to talk about can I close this on my screen? Here we go. Right. Some impacts on your career of the imposter syndrome, right? Here's some of the ways that this impacts us. We oftentimes see people with imposter syndrome have lower job satisfaction, right? Their career choices are made not from a place of growth, but made from a fear of inadequacy. We see high levels of burnout because of that overwork due to performance anxiety and fears of being found out. People with imposter syndrome tend to have a higher organizational commitment, right? You tend to have greater loyalty to the organization than the organization has for you. This may come from fear of, man, I'm not going to be able to swim somewhere else. And I have these people bamboozled. So I'm going to just keep up with this. And at least they know me and they'll be okay if I fall down, but I can't take that somewhere else. So I'm going to be really committed to my organization. We also see the impact of decreased salary and fewer promotions, right? There's this reluctance to market yourself or ask for more stretch projects or taking things on because what if you fail? And reduced knowledge about the job market, right? You're so focused on performing at the current job that you spend less time exploring options outside and doing the necessary work to network and to build that knowledge. But it doesn't just impact you as the individual. If you're a people manager, your imposter syndrome can affect your whole team and affect all the people around you. Now, we're talking about this in a professional capacity, but also the case can be made that this impacts us in our personal lives as well. So what you're seeing here can also impact your families, right? When you think about the pressures that you might put on your children, right? It's another lens to consider this through. So for managers, right, we see behaviors like micromanaging due to concerns about direct reports poorly representing you. So, you don't want anyone to find out you're a fraud. So you need to make sure that your whole team is on top of everything, lest you be found out as a fraudulent manager who's not capable of managing their team. Right? Or you don't delegate properly because you feel like no one does it like you. I see my typo there, and could expose you to risk. You're oftentimes we're hypercritical. You just saw me do it, right? You want to mold your staff into a version of yourself because perfectionism is a part of how imposter syndrome shows up, right? Maybe you're overly anxious about high profile projects and that anxiety spreads to your team. And you can struggle with leveraging your team's moments, right? Like instead of getting caught up in the successes and being able to congratulate people for doing a great job, right? We get caught up on the issues and saying, well, that was okay, but if we would have done this, it could have been even better, right? That impacts not just you, but it impacts your whole team. So what can we do about our imposter syndrome? There are a number of things that we can do to disrupt this cycle. The first thing that we can do is really track your successes and claim your competencies. We heard in our opening keynote speech where they talked about the exercise of what is your story? How do you know what you know about yourself? Taking the time to do the work and documenting what it is that you know about your story and how you know it. Make a list of the things that you have accomplished. Look at that list, pin it up on your desk. Put a Post-it note on your screen. These are the great things that I accomplished this week, and take pride in your competencies and your successes. Build community and allies. This is a really big part of overcoming imposter syndrome. When I told my boss, hey, I'm thinking about doing this presentation, I floated the idea to my mom, and my mom said I was a bullshitter. My boss offered me a reframe. She said, I'm going to tell you that those skills that your mom is talking about, they make you an excellent facilitator. It's why you are the consultant that you are, because you're great at getting up in front of a room and talking to people and going with the flow of the conversation. By sharing that with my boss and somebody who is an ally and in my corner, she was able to offer me a reframe. And so here we are testing it out in practice, right? You can decide at the end of this, am I a bullshitter, or do I really maybe have some good facilitation skills and actually know a little bit about what I'm talking about? There'll be an evaluation at the end. I'll leave that up to you to decide. You really want to challenge your limiting beliefs, and there's a number of ways to do that. This is me in action, challenging my own limiting beliefs and believing that I have something to offer to the conversation. We're talking about reframing our story so that we can advance in our careers, right? This is a huge step for me in doing exactly that and in testing my own limits and my own limiting beliefs. What we're going to focus on for the next half hour is practicing creativity and holding space for first draft thoughts. So practicing creativity can help reduce our anxiety. Crafting, for example, has been shown to increase production of dopamine and slow your heart rate. And creative outlets can be compared to meditation in its effect on managing negative emotions in a productive way. So to set us up for that, I want to talk a little bit about how we know the things we know. So this is a model of knowing that it comes from theorists Heron and Reason, and covered in an article by Alyssa Perry in the Nonprofit Management Quarterly in 2017. And it talks about 4 different ways that we know the things that we know, right? There's foundational knowing, right? And these come from experience. They come from our indigenous or ancestral wisdom, from spiritual or natural wisdom. These are the things that you inherently know, right? And then we have this generalized knowing. Generalized knowing is where we look at patterns and experiments to create concepts. This is where academic theory and proposition lives, as well as theories of change and models of logic, promising practices. And then there's practical knowing, right? Practical knowing is when we act intentionally in the world in ways that are informed by our previous actions, as well as our generalized knowing, right? This is where we take those things that we learn in theory and we learn by doing, right? That's practical knowing. And then over on the left is artistic knowing. Artistic knowing helps us to understand our experiences and to help others understand them. So we create representations through story, through visual art, through movement or music, right? Most of us are comfortable staying in this generalized and practical knowing, and we rarely dip into our foundational knowing or artistic knowing in meaningful ways. By not intentionally drawing on these, our theories and our action plans are often disconnected from our values and our beliefs and the bedrock experiences of our lives. And moreover, privileging one way of knowing over others really marginalizes and ignores other truths that people bring from other ways of knowing. So this marginalization often lies at the core of conflicts and systemic barriers to change, such as our opportunities to interrupt our own imposter syndrome. So we're going to spend time here in this artistic knowing corner. And why? I want to talk about play and why play. Why am I choosing play as the means to interrupt imposter syndrome? So what you're seeing here are some definitions of values. So play, as we understand it, right? Play is defined as more of a state of mind rather than an activity. It's an absorbing, apparently purposeless activity that provides enjoyment and a suspension of self-consciousness and sense of time, right? Generally, play is self-motivating and makes you want to do it again, right? We're all familiar with the notion of, as children, maybe you like to do something, whether that was sports or you like to read or imagine or draw or color or whatever, play with Hot Wheels or Legos or Barbie dolls, right? There are many, many different ways that we play, but I want to focus on play as a value. So Professor Brian Hall in his research defined what is known as the Hall-Tona value system. So this model that he created renders the human experience into 125 values. There's 29 goal or being values and 96 means or doing values. These encompass various dimensions of knowing, being, and doing. So the 125 values exist in a relationship with one another across 4 worldviews or orders of consciousness. Each are more progressively complex than the previous. And so like some foundational values are safety and security and belonging. And then it expands to more complex and visionary ones like presence and human dignity, wisdom, global sustainability, and justice. Values give significance to our lives and they mediate our inner and outer lives. These ideals are what combine to form our beliefs, to determine our emotional responses, and direct our outward behavior. These external expressions all flow from values because each person and group of people have values. So the value system is critical because it's what gives meaning to our individual lives as well as the lives of our organization. So on the screen here are 3 values that I picked from this system to talk about that are relevant to our discussion, right? Fantasy play and play recreation are goal values. These are ways of being, right? So fantasy play as a value is defined as the experience of personal worth through unrestrained imagination and personal amusement. How do we understand our own worth through our imaginative expressions and our amusement? Play recreation is a value about pastime or diversion from the anxiety of day-to-day living for the purpose of undirected spontaneous refreshment. And through this spontaneous refreshment, it provides potential for our true self to be experienced. The last value that I include on this list is creativity, because this one speaks so presently to me when it comes to interrupting imposter syndrome, right? And this is the capacity for original thought and expression that brings new ideas and images into a practical and concrete reality in ways that did not previously exist. If you've lived your life with imposter syndrome, finding new ways to understand yourself that have not previously existed are really important. So we're going to start with an embodying imagination exercise. So we're going to get a little bit curious here. So 2 of the most common forms of play are movement of the body and using our imagination. So we're going to do a little bit of a guided meditation that's going to allow us to do both. So I'm going to ask you at this time to find a comfortable position for yourself, whether that's sitting or standing. You may want to place your hands on your lap. If you want to stand, you can place your hands at your side. If you're comfortable, you can close your eyes or focus your gaze on one spot. So I'd like you to begin with your attention, with your eyes closed, begin with your attention directed outward, noticing the sounds around you. Concentrate on all the things that you can hear. Gradually, I'm going to ask you to turn your attention inward, turning your attention away from your surroundings, in towards yourself. Focus on your physical self. Notice how you are feeling. Observe your body. Feel your feet grounded inside your shoes, on the ground, inside your socks. Focus even more intently now on your breathing. Observe your breath without trying to change anything. Bring your attention deeply inward, all the way to the core of your body. Notice how your stomach moves in and out with each breath you take. Feel the movement of the core of your body, ever so slightly moving with each breath you take. Focus completely on your core. Notice how smooth, calm, and regular your breathing is. Allow the tension to leave your body, relaxing your muscles so that you can rest calmly. As you start to become more relaxed, we're going to focus on becoming more playful. Every one of us has the ability to be playful. Playfulness is a trait that we all have inside, but for many of us, playfulness has been pushed aside as we strive to be more serious. Breathe deep and remember the ability to be playful is important because it allows you to experience fun and joy. Becoming more playful allows you to respond to challenges with humor and lightheartedness instead of always being serious or becoming defensive. With your eyes closed, today we're going to imagine that we are trees in a forest. This conference is the forest and you are the tree. Imagine the type of tree that you want to be. As you imagine, breathe in. Imagine a small point of light in your belly. This is the seed that you are sprouting from. Breathe in and watch that light seed begin to grow and sprout roots. Breathe in and feel your roots growing from that seed down into your legs and to your feet. Find your roots in the floor and imagine that you are becoming really stable, starting from your feet, just like the roots of a tree, connecting you down to the earth. Imagine that you are growing taller and stronger up into the sky. Move your attention from your feet up through your legs and into your arms. Notice how your bark is absolutely gorgeous. The base of your tree is so massive that you can't even get your arms wrapped all the way around it. Your roots run so deep and so wide that no amount of wind or rain would ever be able to uproot you. But your branches may sway. Imagine your branches swaying in the wind as your roots remain firmly planted. As you envision yourself firmly grounded, you sense yourself sitting upright, growing taller and taller with each inhale. Envision the sun shining high and bright in the sky. And as the sun kisses your face, imagine the beautiful, warm, bright sunlight extending down through your extremities, which represent your branches and leaves. The sun represents your soul, your inner being that knows exactly who you are at your core and loves you wholly. As you feel this love from your soul beaming down upon your face, you begin to take in that love. You feel it absorbing into your skin as it flows deep into your chest, filling you up with enough positivity to get through your day. Imagine your growth. If you are comfortable, you may raise your arms to become that tree. This part of the tree where the branches spread and grow tall is called the canopy. It's the part where all the branches connect and animals can make home. Beautiful things can grow in the canopy when the trees and the forest are all connected. Imagine the animals that might live in your forest canopy. Maybe you have some butterflies on your branches or baby birds. Maybe you have little caterpillars on your leaves. What do you want to live in this space, this tree that you are? Travel all the way up to the very top of your tree beyond any branches. Take a moment here to see what you would like to see. This is your land of possibility. What does your forest look like? Is it tropical? Is it in the mountains? Is it sunny outside? Are you somewhere familiar? You can imagine anything here. If your arms are still raised, gently lower them, but continue to feel your roots running deep into the ground. Take a deep breath and feel your strength. When you're ready, you can gently open your eyes and return to this space. This imagining through meditation is a technique I use regularly to interrupt when I'm feeling like I'm in over my head. What stage am I at as a plant, as a tree? Where am I? Am I feeling the need to close in and be the seed and be underground and protect myself? Am I ready to sprout? You can do this before a stressful meeting. This is an activity that you can do at any time to give yourself space and room to imagine your own strength and your own rootedness. Now, what I'm going to ask you to do next is to grab your pencil, paper, crayons, markers, highlighters, any other drawing material that you have available. Doesn't matter what you're using. If you don't have a piece of paper available, do you have a paper plate? Do you have a paper towel? Do you have an envelope, some junk mail, something that you can draw on? Any kind of paper will do. If you don't have paper available, because I know some of us don't, you can use the Notes app on your phone or the Paint app on your phone or computer. I really highly recommend that you grab pencil and paper if possible, because the physical act of drawing allows us to tap into that presentational knowing in different ways. So I encourage you to use pen and paper, pencil and paper if you have them, but if you don't, your Notes or Paint app will work. As a last resort, Jamboard is available as a tool to all of us, and you can draw on Jamboard as well. So let me tell you a little bit about what I'm going to ask you to draw right now. So drawing art, right? It's a play-based aesthetic outflow. It arises from pre-verbal, emotionally inspired places that signal an open heart, right? The arts are indicators of emotional intelligence, but they also produce emotional intelligence. They help us grow and adapt. So by choosing creative expression, we're stepping out of our normal routine. We're finding novelty, we're being open to serendipity, and we're enjoying the unexpected, embracing a little risk, right? Creative play allows us to take risk without threatening our survival. So we get to imagine possibilities that maybe we wouldn't be able to bring into practice when we face imposter syndrome. So for the next 5 minutes, what I'm going to ask you to do is, if you have a piece of paper, I'm going to ask you to divide it in two, right? Fold it in half. And on the left side of the paper, I'm going to ask you to draw your obstacles, right? What are the things about imposter syndrome that are getting in your way? What does your imposter syndrome look like, feel like? What would it look like if imposter syndrome, so that's the left side of the paper. What does your imposter syndrome look like or feel like? What are the obstacles? On the right side of the paper, the question is, what would it look like if imposter syndrome didn't get in your way? What might be possible if you weren't struggling with imposter syndrome? So I'm going to start some music and give us about 5 minutes to do this drawing activity. It is 12:15, so 12:20. There's no wrong way to draw. There's no right or wrong thing that can show up on your paper. You're simply opening yourself up to what shows up. So allow yourself to be abundant in your creativity. At first, not making judgments about what you think, feel, or do. Just play with your ideas, right? If you're stuck, try imagining 50 impossible solutions, right? And there's no wrong way for you to draw this out. Okay, let's go ahead and what we're going to do next is open up our breakout rooms. Let's stop share here. So I'm going to ask you we're going to put you in breakout rooms of 5. And while you're in your breakout rooms, the thing that you want to talk about, if you are comfortable sharing your drawing, you may do so. You do not have to share your drawing if you are not comfortable to do so. But what I'd like you to talk about in breakout rooms, we're going to be in breakout rooms for about 8 minutes. Talk about what was the process of drawing your vision like for you? Was it easy to draw? Was it hard? And if so, why, right? What was getting in your way? What showed up for you? So again, it's optional. If you want to share your drawing and talk about the content of your drawing, you're totally welcome to do so. But if you're not comfortable sharing your drawing, I just want you to share what the process was like in your conversations. So if we can go ahead and set up breakout rooms for groups of 5. We'll open breakout rooms for about 8 minutes.
Okay, perfect. I'm going to open all the breakout rooms now.
Welcome back to those of you who have made it back already. We have about 35 seconds before everyone else joins us. And I believe that should be everyone back now. So thank you for those of you who stayed. I know we often lose people when we go to breakout rooms, so I really appreciate you hanging around. I want to hear from a couple folks about what that was like for you. So if we have anyone who'd like to volunteer, you can use the raise hand feature. I'd like to take at least 3 comments from folks to just hear about either what that process was like to draw out your imposter syndrome, or what the process was like for you to share that information. So if I can get at least 3 volunteers, I see at least
you have Alicia.
Yeah, thanks.
You want to go ahead and I will ask you to unmute and go for it.
Hello. So this was a very hard process for me. I hate drawing, but I just kind of humored you and went with it. And I was pleased to say that multiple people in my group had very similar images as far as like a wall and having access to get over it or not having access to get over it, or hills and being at the top either when you remove the imposter syndrome, or being at the bottom when you're on the left side of the paper where you are actually a victim or self-subscribed imposter. So I think it's very interesting. I don't know if you've ever done this before, but I feel like if you were to take an aggregate of all of the images, I wonder how many of them would be the same. It's very shocking.
I appreciate that suggestion too. I have not, but yeah, I would imagine in person we'd probably have a much easier time of doing that. But yes, it is so many of us experience the same thing. Really, I thank you for sharing that and for recognizing that in your group as well. I see Zoe's hand raised.
Yeah.
Hi. Yeah, we talked to us, a couple of us in my group. We had like a really strong sense of emotions related to the imposter syndrome part of the drawing. And mine was really just shapes and colors. But it was like very emotional. And then the other side was like a little bit maybe harder to draw, but it was more like a vision of what I want the future to look like. So there was less like pure feeling in the body on that one. But it was kind of like it was a weight lifted for a few of us.
I wonder how we get to that point where, like, even if drawing it out, it wasn't a felt sense in the body, but where it becomes a felt sense in your body that you can be on the other side of this, right? Like how we build that connection. Yeah. How about one more person? Let's hear from one more person about what that process was like for you. This is not an easy thing to do, tapping into this part of our knowing. We're not used to doing this. We're taught as adults that play is for kids, right? So this is not easy. I didn't expect it to be easy for any of you. Although if it was, that's great, fantastic. But yeah, it's not an easy process to begin. Anyone else want to share? I see two hands. We'll take them both. Let's start with Faye because you popped up first on my list, and then Laura.
Yeah, it sounds like I did it a bit differently. I went with the first side was, what does it look like, imposter looks like in your world? So I ended up drawing a bunch of objects. And I must say there was a lot of resistance when I did this exercise. I was like, I don't need to do this. I know what's holding me back. But when I started writing drawing on it, I realized that there was actually a lot. So a clock with a slash, I feel like I never have any time. And I also thought about this word like weight, and I call it weight, and it's two friends. So the weight, you carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders because you make yourself responsible for so many things to kind of for validation or proving or whatever. And then there's that always waiting where you're avoiding what you need to do. And then there's waste, and that's the wasting time that, you say you have no time, but it's because you're procrastinating and avoiding what you need to do, and then being sleeping and always tired. But then on the left side, kind of drawing what you would look like without imposter syndrome. And it was like, you'll do more of your passion, your art, you like write more, your living situation may get a little bit better because you get those projects you have around the house tackled, spend more time with family, trying new things. So I think from the exercise, I saw how it really was weighing me down a little bit. Weighing me down.
I'm so glad that you benefited from this. And the resistance is something to learn from too, right? There's knowledge in our resistance. When we spend the time looking at our own resistance, we learn so much about ourselves. So thank you for playing along. I really appreciate it. Laura, let's hear from you.
So I just wanted to share the sense of vulnerability that I felt in this exercise. The drawing part was easy. And I went with your meditation, and then all of a sudden in a group setting, and I have colleagues in this workshop, I started saying, oh my God, I can't let anybody know that I have these feelings and that I struggle with this, because I'm supposed to be this, whatever this is, right?
Yep.
And it's okay. And it's okay.
If anything that poll shows you, every single one of us in this space is struggling with this. We are not alone. And when we start talking about it, we can start to deal with it. You can't fix what you're not willing to look at.
Right, exactly.
So thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have a couple more slides and I know we're almost at time, and I just have a couple more things that I want to share with you guys. So I'm going to go back to sharing my screen and talk through some other pieces here. We just did this one. I want to share with you some of my drawings because I told you y'all that you didn't have to do this, but I use this technique myself regularly to make sense of myself. I am not an artist. Believe that I'm terrible at drawing. It does not matter. My favorite question in my own meditative drawing prompts are, what's up, chick? What's going on with you? I never know what is going to show up. It shows up in all kinds of ridiculous ways. I'm going to draw your attention to the left drawing here. These are my monsters. You will see my left-hand monster is in the shape of a heart. Everyone loves me. They want good things for me. They care about me. But why y'all always looking at me? Why y'all checking in on me all the time? All those little bunnies and chicks underneath that umbrella, that's my vulnerability right there. Right? And I'm feeling unprotected. I have this umbrella, this false sense of security that's not protecting me from anything. That's what my monsters look like. I draw them out. That's one of my favorite things to draw is my monsters. What am I feeling afraid of? And what if I gave it a visual, would it look like? The one in the middle here, we all have stories, right? Every one of us. Sometimes our life feels like a pile of rubble. But you know what? I can choose to create stability from my stories. I can choose to organize my stories in a way that they give me a solid foundation. I could not have articulated that if I had not done that drawing. It's just what showed up. All of these, the one on the right is I drew when I was a kid. They had us do this assignment where we had to make a picture out of our initials. And then I got a divorce and my initials changed. And what does my picture look like? This is a replica of my first grade picture of drawing my initials into shapes. And then I carved my new initials onto my tree. My initials had been SJ and now they're SM. And here it is. And I'm ready to claim myself, right? I'm not that girl anymore. I can decide what my tree looks like now. This is a technique that I use regularly to tap into what am I feeling. Vision boarding is another technique that I use. I showed you my 2021. These are my 2020 and 2019 boards. That's what they look like. 2019, hear all the music. I listened to the Rolling Stone top 500 albums of all time. I listened to the entire list, right? It was a focus for me. I named it so I could claim it, figuring out what do I want to do? What do I want to be? This is all just from junk mail, right? It's just a visual to remind myself that, you know what, I can create whatever it is that I want to create. It's my reminder to look and see what's possible. I want to share one more activity that we won't have time to do, but I'm going to ask to drop in the chat the link to this life prompt poetry. This is a document that you can view. You'll need to make a copy of it. It's a Google Doc. It is just a series of prompts, sentence prompts. Our keynote speaker said, tell your story, get to know your story. This life prompt poetry activity is a means and a method for you to start thinking about, A, what is your story? I like to do both, right? What is the story I'm telling myself now? B, what is the story I want to be telling myself? So these are simply sentence prompts for you to start thinking about what your story might look like and what you might want it to be. So I hope that you will each make a copy of that. Another technique that I use is called rhyme time journaling. So this is one I've done since I was a kid. And I'm going to leave you with this last piece. So rhyme time journaling is another technique to get at your story. And what I do is I pick a sound, doesn't matter what sound it is, and then I make a list of rhyming words. Doesn't matter what the words are. And then I start crafting a story. So for example, when I was preparing for this presentation, my word sound that I started with was A. So my words that I listed were say, today, obey, delay, pray, may, J, play. Those were my words, right? I have no idea where this story is going to go. I just make a list of rhyming words. And then in this activity, I make sentences. So here's what showed up as I was preparing for this presentation. I'm going to read this to you. It's crappy poetry, and that's okay. All of this is to say that though I may not have it together today, I will obey the process of delving in without delay. Every day I play, and I pray that the results may benefit my peers, and like a baby jaybird, watch them grow and fly, free to play in their own blue skies. Who knows? It's just what shows up, but it's an opportunity to lean forward into what it is that I want to build. Again, I'm mindful of time, and I would have liked to have a little more time to unpack some of these, but we don't have a lot of time. So I do want to talk to you a little bit about resources. Someone mentioned in the comments that they'd love to see the book list. Here's some of the things that I have utilized. Lisa and Richard Orbe Austin, check out their Instagram, Dr. Orbe Austin. It is phenomenal. They have a TED Talk that is fantastic. I really enjoy her work. It is very grounding for me to read what she has to say. If you want to know more about play and why it's important as adults and not just for kids, Stuart Brown wrote a book, Play, How It Shapes the Brain, Opens the Imagination, and Invigorates the Soul. And The Secret Thoughts of Successful Women. This informed much of the presentation that you saw today, why capable people suffer from the imposter syndrome and how to thrive in spite of it. So those are some of the most key resources that I have utilized in this presentation and to shape my own understanding. And that is the extent of what I have to share with you guys today. I think Maya has some things to share here at the end.
Yes. Thank you, Sabina. That was amazing. I think that everyone is in agreement that that was just a phenomenal presentation. Don't forget, everyone, that the deck will be available on the Now Conference website. I did go ahead and drop in the session evaluation, and I will drop that in again. So that you can let us know, give us feedback, let us know how we did. Next up, we will have a 1-hour lunch break. Go get some sustenance. If you are interested in participating in a network activity, there are 2 times available for you to join in, one from 12:50 to 1:15, and then one from 1:15 to 1:40. You can find the Zoom links on the venue website. Registration is not required for the networking activities. So if you're interested, feel free to just pop in and network with some of your UC colleagues. We will reconvene at 1:45 in our main webinar room for an optional adult recess, which is perfect after this stretch break. The third and final round of breakout sessions will begin at 2 o'clock. And all the Zoom links for activities can be found on the website. Again, I do just want to say thank you so much to you, Sabina, for joining us and helping us navigate our imposter syndrome. I suffer with it myself, so this was just a joy to be a part of. I'm so glad I was able to listen in. Very powerful presentation. Thank you, everybody, for joining, and I will again drop that session eval one more time. And we are good to go. See you later, everybody.
Thank you so much.